Now, I can't say that I expected it, but Liverpool have completed the signing of Jeremie Frimpong from Bayer Leverkusen today, triggering that €35 million release clause in his contract and signing him up to a 5-year contract. And it's an interesting signing, I think, because I've been banging the drum for a while, really, that Trent Alexander-Arnold is effectively irreplaceable. You can't find another right back on the market who has that same profile. He is pretty unique in world football, but Liverpool have decided that Frimpong is a way of replacing him, a method of replacing him, and I wanted to really have a look into why they might think that and why they think he is a good option to come in on that right hand side. So I took a look at the numbers really to kind of see exactly what type of player Liverpool are getting and why he was wanted. And I want to start really with where he plays on the pitch, which might sound like an interesting place to start with someone who we know is coming in to play right back. It sounds a bit silly, I guess, but you actually look where he does most of his work, and I think some pretty interesting findings here. So I'm going to start actually by bringing up Trent's heat map from this season, and just to show you where he operated. And I don't think any real surprises in there. He's a fullback, isn't he? And he's in a lot of fullback positions just down that right hand side. There's a little bit of tucking in there. We know he inverted from time to time, but it looks fairly traditional, really. Nothing too outlandish there. We know that Slot has used him in a more orthodox way maybe than we would have expected Jurgen Klopp to do in his final season. So as I say, just a very orthodox right back heat map that you're looking at there, with maybe a little bit more tucking inside. And then I want to bring up Frimpong next to that, just so you can compare the two side by side. And although we know he's played wing back for Bayer Leverkusen in his time there, I still think this is pretty amazing, really, pretty surprising in all honesty. I mean, there's basically nothing in that actual right back spot, is there? It's all mostly high up the pitch and really advanced positions. He just doesn't look like he's doing a lot of traditional right back things in his time at Leverkusen. So that really surprised me, just how stark the difference is between the two. And I mean, I spoke about Trent being unique in world football, but his positioning was more traditional in that last season, and Frimpong is nothing like that, really. So I think that's a really interesting part of it. And in fact, the best comparison in terms, I think, of Frimpong's heat map is to bring up Salah's alongside him. And you look at those two, and I think they're actually a little bit closer of a comparison, really. Obviously, Salah a little bit more in central areas in the box. He does get there as a striker a lot of the time, doesn't he? But it's closer to Frimpong's, I would say, than maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold. So I think the clear takeaway, really, in terms of his positioning and what he's played and his experience in recent years at least, is that Liverpool are getting far from a traditional right back here in terms of the role he has been playing. Now, of course, the fact he is so advanced all the time has a little bit of an effect on his attacking numbers. Now, you can have a look on FB Ref. These are his numbers against all of the traditional fullbacks. And of course, because he's in that more advanced position, as you would expect, he shows up incredibly for non-penalty goals, shots, assists, really, really impressive numbers. And in fact, that's backed up by his kind of actual output, really, which is 5 goals and 12 assists in 48 appearances this season. So pretty impressive there. And I'd say, Trent, even though he played as a more orthodox fullback, he always showed up really well in these sort of statistics like shots and getting assists and creativity and that. And I have to say that there's the kind of a cheat element really to Frimpong's numbers, because he's being compared there and being put in certain percentiles versus right backs or left backs who, they do have to be in deeper positions a lot more. They're coming from that area. So, those numbers are a little bit swayed by the fact that he is so far up the pitch. And I think we saw an example of that, actually, his positioning when he was at Anfield earlier this season. You saw the disallowed goal he scored as very much a kind of winger's goal, jetting in behind and finishing it off, even though it was just slightly offside. So that does help him to get more numbers that are more akin to something that a winger would post rather than a fullback. And so it's a little bit unfair maybe when you compare him to his positional peers. But that said, I think even with the positional effects in play there, I still think those are still impressive numbers that he can, look, if he gets in those positions in the final third frequently enough that he can create, he can find the final pass, he is able to finish off if you get him there. And I do think that can be useful for Liverpool and shows that he is a very, very good player. And I particularly think in games maybe where you're up against a low block and they've no intention really of kind of having a go at you. And, if you can have a fullback who is effectively playing as a winger, we saw that for so many years under Jurgen Klopp. It is helpful to have someone who's capable of doing that. And Frimpong is very much that type of fullback if he is going to be used in that sort of way. Now, of course, it's not just about attacking output. If he is going to be used in a back four, we don't expect that Slot's going to go to an out-and-out back three, maybe situationally, but he will probably stick, let's be honest, with a back four generally. And so if he is going to be in that back four, he's going to have to be doing a little bit of defending, isn't he? And that's long been said to be a little bit of a weakness of Trent Alexander-Arnold. So interesting to see how he stacks up, or the two players stack up. And I will just bring up Jeremie Frimpong's defensive numbers over the last 365 days. Again, these are compared to his fellow fullbacks in the top European leagues, or the top 5 European leagues. Now, I will sound a note of caution, because instantly when you see this graphic, you'll see a lot of red and it doesn't look very impressive at all. I will say these are volume stats, so it's the amount of tackles that you're making and things like that, the amount of interceptions. And look, if you're being positioned by your manager very high up the pitch, you're probably not going to make as many tackles. You're probably not going to have to, put together as many defensive numbers. And so I think that is worth noting, really, when you're looking at these numbers. They do look poor, but he's not being asked to do a lot of this. So that is part of the reason. And I think it's interesting, his tackles won percentage is 75.8%, which is very, very high. In fact, it kind of surprised me that Trent's was quite high as well, 70.4%. Now, 75.8% for Frimpong, that puts him in the 90th percentile in the Bundesliga. So he's very, very high up in terms of that. Again, you kind of sound a note of caution because he's only making around 1 tackle per 90 minutes. So his ability to win tackles is not being tested very often. And if he has to do more, maybe that figure drops. And as I say, Trent was kind of low on defensive output and the volume that he was putting in there, but could win a high amount of tackles. So will those defensive weaknesses be there still if he does more, or if he does get the opportunity to put more volume together in his defensive output? Will it look a little bit more impressive? Maybe we're about to find out. And I think, it's worth mentioning also that his duels percentage, that he's winning 43.6%. Again, that compares to Trent, who was 46.9%. And they are also, duels are very much take-ons as well as the defensive aspect. So any time you're competing for the ball. So, less than 50% on that, which is not particularly impressive. And another statistic I thought was interesting is he's dribbled past 0.5 times per 90. Now, against Trent, he was on a whopping 2.12, and I think that one-on-one weakness was something that, really kind of grated supporters at times, wasn't it? Something a weakness they wanted to take out of Trent's game. Again, not quite clear whether that's going to be a weakness for Frimpong or not, because he's in that advanced position. How often is someone dribbling at him? We don't really know. And, I guess it's not happening as frequently as it would if he were a traditional fullback, which he is largely going to be used, as you would imagine, at Liverpool. So some interesting stuff. That tackle percentage is very high. Duels percentage is quite low. And as I say, those volume statistics, we can't read too much into them. But I just think they're worth taking a look at, really, to give us a little bit of a picture. Maybe with Frimpong, we're going to have to learn a little bit more as he comes into the team and we see him at fullback in terms of whether he is capable of winning those battles down his flank, because Liverpool will certainly be asking him to, and he's going to have to probably show up a little bit better than he has done over the last few years or so in terms of that. But of course, he has played at fullback for Celtic, so it's not completely new to him, but let's kind of see how that one pans out. Now, of course, one of the aspects about Trent Alexander-Arnold that I think Liverpool will miss the most, and something I've been banging on about for a long time, really, is his ability to get Liverpool up the pitch through an incredible pass, firing it through the lines, one in behind for Mo Salah, just finding a pass that nobody else could see. And that has been so handy in games where Liverpool have been on the back foot, the midfielders have been under pressure. I've often called him a kind of cheat code for getting you up the pitch, because who has a right back who can pass like that? Nobody really, or now Real Madrid. So that is one of the aspects, I think, around Trent that Liverpool would miss the most. And so I took a look at the progressive passing from Frimpong, just generally his passing and his progression that he's willing to offer. And I think you can see immediately Frimpong is not Trent Alexander-Arnold in these terms. Now, 35.5 passes per 90, so he's not passing the ball even that frequently. He's not being given it to pass it that often, because 35.5, you compare that to Trent, who was 71.18 over the last year or so. That's how many passes he's making per 90. So Liverpool giving him the ball constantly to move it. Progressive passes again, 1.95 per 90 for Frimpong, 8.52 for Trent Alexander-Arnold. So that puts them in the top 5 European leagues, in the 3rd percentile for Jeremie Frimpong, so low down. So 97% of fullbacks are better in that regard, and the 99th percentile for Trent Alexander-Arnold. So a real difference in the two there in terms of how they offer progression, or if they are at all able to offer progression in terms of the passing. But there is some upside to Frimpong there, and I think he's a bit more like Bradley in terms of that he gets the ball up the pitch by carrying it. So you look at his progressive carries there, 4.07 per 90, and progressive passes received as well. He's also quite high up for that, really high up in fact. And so again, it maybe shows you he's a carrier and then someone who is more likely to receive the progressive passes from others. So I think that's interesting. And I mean, in terms of his carrying, he was 8th for progressive carries in the Bundesliga this season, 10th for carries into the penalty area in all of Europe's top 5 leagues last season. So he's very, very good at that aspect, which is dribbling forward, and he shows up well in take-ons as well. So he's more of a dribbler, more of a carrier. And that, of course, if you've not got that passing progression coming from your fullback there, that's going to be a tweak that Liverpool are going to have to get used to. It's something for the manager to kind of set up tactically and think about as well. And I do wonder, if you're going to have carriers like Bradley, like Frimpong in your right back spot, do you need to find those penetrative passes from somewhere else, maybe a signing in midfield or something like that? The fact that they've not tried to replace it at right back is interesting to me, and I think maybe suggests they do want to get more progression into that midfield. I certainly think they need to, because I think it's something they will miss otherwise, but they have got some very, very good carriers in the team, and I think Frimpong will definitely add to that. And I think, in fact, that is possibly the most fascinating aspect of this signing, really, is the implications for the team as a whole, and exactly how Arne Slot is going to use the player now. Obviously, for me, I still think, and this is the feeling we're given at the moment, that Conor Bradley is very high in the thinking, and if he can stay fit, then he's got a real chance of being the first choice there. But of course, we will see in terms of that. But also, I think, it makes sense, this Frimpong signing, from that perspective, because if Bradley's going to eat up a lot of right back minutes, you still need a backup for him. But in Frimpong, you've got someone who has got a lot of qualities that a winger would have as well. And I think, really you need to probably give Mo Salah a few more rests in the coming seasons, because, he's getting a little bit older. You want to keep him in that peak fitness. You don't want him to kind of fade away a little bit towards the end of the season, which has happened the last couple of times. I think it's maybe overstated, but he hasn't quite been at the level he started season. So maybe a bit more rotation there would really help. And I think one way of doing that is having an option like Frimpong to maybe come in and take some of the starts off him. And of course, Salah is at AFCON next year as well, so that's something to think about. So he offers a lot in terms of that versatility, covers a couple of positions, and I think that's healthy and helpful, isn't it, in terms of keeping a happy squad, really, where it doesn't necessarily have to be utterly massive, but you've got players who can fill in various positions. That's how you keep players happy, because you're keeping them involved. And I think another aspect to this player as well, which I think is worth mentioning, beyond all the other things, which of course is that he's homegrown, he was very, very cheap with that release clause, and that he is, he's a talented player who's won the German league and played at a high level, but also he's the 7th fastest player in the Bundesliga this season, 36.43 kilometers per hour top speed. And I think one of the things you would maybe say about this team, there's not a huge amount of weaknesses in it, although it is, they are looking to kick on and get to that next level. But one of the areas you'd say that maybe needed a little bit more was pace, really. I felt like this Liverpool team needed to add pace, and Jeremie Frimpong has got that in spades. So that is an exciting aspect about his game, along with all the other things like the attacking output, the carries, the fact he's versatile. So an awful lot to like around this signing, and a lot of upside for Liverpool. But of course, it's all about what they do on the pitch rather than just looking at the numbers, and we will have to wait until pre-season to see what that looks like. But it is a very exciting one, I think, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how he gets on. Now, do let me know your thoughts in the comment on Frimpong as a signing. Do you think it's a smart one? Do you think He has a chance of being first choice ahead of Bradley on that right-hand side. Would you like to see him in that advanced role from time to time? Do let me know your thoughts, and anyone who's watched him a little bit more than I have, let me know about your thoughts on his ability to defend. Any Celtic fans out there can maybe tell you what he's a bit more like in a back four, and any Leverkusen fans are a bit more experienced of seeing him defending live. Always interested to hear your thoughts. But I'm going to wrap it up there anyway. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys very soon.